Welcome to Telewizja Republika. A Russian missile attack on Dnipro on Wednesday morning resulted in 5 deaths and 34 injuries, including a child, as reported by the city's mayor Boris Filatov on Telegram. The Dnipropetrovsk regional military administration head Serhiy Lysak confirmed the increased casualty numbers. A shopping center was also damaged in the attack, with many injured, suffering shrapnel and cut wounds. Rescue operations continued at the site. According to Kyiv Independent source, a Ukrainian drone attack on July 1st seriously damaged the Oskol electrometallurgical plant in Belgorod Oblast, Russia's only full-cycle metallurgical enterprise. The attack, involving kamikaze drones, caused a complete blackout, halting all operations. The plant's furnaces were damaged, potentially requiring months to restart, severely impacting Russia's military-industrial capabilities. Ukraine's security service SBU announced it has thwarted a plot to overthrow the government. Nothing new in a way, which was set to trigger a riot in Kyiv on June 30. The plot aimed to seize control of the Ukrainian parliament, again, and remove the military and political leadership, again. 4 suspects were identified, with 2 in custody. Weapons, ammunition and other evidence were seized, as reported by the SBU on Telegram. Reuters reports that NATO has agreed to provide Ukraine with 40 billion euros in military aid next year. This commitment will be finalized during the NATO summit in Washington. The aid is intended to ensure long-term support for Ukraine amid its ongoing conflict with Russia, maintaining the annual average commitment since the full-scale war began in 2022. You can join us on rachon.com. That's our website. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our daily reports, or actually our reports from the front lines of the ongoing war against the West that we try to report on this program. My name is Michał Rachon. This is Rachon. And we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
Our guest tonight on Rachon is Mr. Mark Voyger. Mr. Voyger is a non-resident senior fellow with the Transatlantic Defense and Security Program at the Center for European Analysis. He has previously served as a visiting scholar with the Penn-Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement and was the senior lecturer in Russia and Eastern European Studies at the Baltic Defense College in Tartu, Estonia. Prior to his academic career, he served as the special advisor for Russian and Eurasian affairs to the Commanding General of U.S. Army Europe in Wiesbaden, Germany, 2017-18, and as a cultural advisor and senior Russia expert at NATO's Allied Land Command in Izmir, Turkey, between the years 2013-2017. Sir, great to have you on our program. Welcome to Telewizja Republika.
Michał, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be part of your show.
Thank you very much for your time and your presence, because we are actually witnessing for many weeks, also here in Warsaw, where I'm right now, not only here in Warsaw, some significant effects of what is considered an hybrid war of Russia against NATO states. We are witnessing fires. We are reading reports about the commandos or groups of Russian saboteurs traveling around Europe. And we read the statements of the official institutions of NATO member states who claim that this is exactly the case, and those are the reasons of some fires, some explosions, some different and strange things that are happening all over Europe. So my question is actually very simple. Are we at hybrid war against Russia? Is Russia waging a hybrid warfare against the NATO alliance?
Yes, Michał, you're absolutely right. We keep hearing more and more about these hybrid incidents, but it's not a matter of the last couple of weeks or even couple of months. This has been the case almost since day one of Putin's presidency. When Putin came to power, and with him the KGB, took over Russia again, he came with an agenda, with the agenda of really restoring the Soviet empire, maybe in a light version, but definitely kind of reuniting this Eurasian space under Russia's control, and of weakening the West in general, the democratic West. That means NATO, that means the European Union, and of course Poland and Ukraine are primary targets, as well as the Baltic states. Because Putin and his entourage are most of all coming from the KGB, their preferred method of subverting the West is not a direct military attack, but it is exactly what we call hybrid warfare. And hybrid warfare means multiple tools, such as information warfare, such as legal warfare, lawfare, such as cyber warfare, intelligence, using infrastructure, using criminal groups, using intelligence, subversive units, as you pointed out. Also the economy. I mean, every non-military tool, every non-military sphere has been weaponized by Russia. Culture, religion. I mean, look at.
Let's stop here for a second, because you actually drew a complex picture of all the activities that Russia, as a criminal state, basically is using to undermine the European Union, NATO states on various fields. But you said something very interesting and very, I would say, uncommon in terms of the views of the experts of the West, because we remember Western politicians who were trying to put it this way, jump in bed with Vladimir Putin. We even remember people who were thinking about this KGB colonel at the early years of his career as some kind of modern Russia leader who is going to change the Russia on a tune of a Western democracy in a way. It was naive from the perspective of states, post-communist states like my state. We actually knew very well what KGB means and what FSB means. But this is very rare and very unique viewpoint that actually this war lasts for 24 years, actually. And I would even say that that it's not even the full scale of this time. Why this view is not so popular among Western analysts of Russia?
Well, the West, unfortunately, is quite naive, in assuming that Putin and his entourage are sort of those modern, relatively younger leaders that can change Russia. Almost like the Western politicians thought of Putin as a new Peter the Great of sorts, which is ridiculous because Putin has always been an ultra conservative when it comes to his fascination with communism, Stalinism, the Soviet system. He was just able to conceal those views from some of the Western politicians. And don't forget, hybrid warfare is all about deception. Deception is at the core of this phenomenon, of this Russian type of warfare, being able to delude, to mislead your enemy, which is the West, into thinking that Russia is a force to. And so this allowed Putin and his regime to buy time. So as America was fighting in the Middle East for almost 2 decades, obviously Afghanistan and Iraq, and then other areas across the global south, Putin was able to buy time, rearm and prepare for this new round of aggression. Unfortunately, as I said, the Western politicians were deluding themselves, naively hoping that he can be dealt with. Also, there's another erroneous viewpoint. We often called him and his regime a kleptocracy, meaning that they're only interested in stealing money. Yes, they are very interested in stealing money. But these are not regular political crooks. These are ideologues. He has this ideological agenda to restore the Soviet Union. If they were just regular corrupt politicians, like some of the dictators across the global south, that would have been the lesser evil. But he has an agenda to restore.
Again, very important point. Again, very rare, because it actually means that this group, or actually this entity, because I would strongly argue that it really doesn't matter if we are talking about Putin, or if we imagine that somebody else can be a different Putin with a different name and with a different appearance, but the whole system works on the basis of kleptocracy, but the imperialism and rebuilding the political framework of ruling over certain states is the real game plan here. Is that correct?
Absolutely, because kleptocracy in this case helps the Putin's regime to extract resources from the population, from the companies that are supported by the Kremlin, and so as a result, he's able to squeeze funds for his criminal adventures, internationally, and also for his criminal war against Ukraine. Is
it also the secret of the influence that Russia has in the Western countries? Because we often know it as some kind of, maybe not now, but if we rewind and think about the reality of the Western states, let's say 10, 15 years ago, we remember phrases like Londongrad. We know that there was some Russian money involved in investments in various Western states. We had the Russian tycoons investing heavily in the United States. We were having Germany as a state cooperating with Russia, and we actually do have a former German chancellor being on the payroll of this regime. It looks like this kleptocracy as a tool is also used to leverage the Russian influence within the Western political and economical spheres.
This is absolutely true, and unfortunately it doesn't go back only 5, 10, or even 25 years under Putin. It goes back over a century with the Western dealings, even with the Soviet Union. But if we go back to the post-Cold War period, what you're describing is the unfortunate outcome of the theory of economic interdependence. Back in the 70s, some scholars in the US at Harvard, Joseph Nye, I studied under him actually at Harvard, and some others, developed this theory that if two countries, two great powers are interdependent, for example, America and China, or let's say Germany and Russia, if they exchange commercial goods and they have business dealings, that means that their behavior will be normal. That means that Russia, in this case, would behave normally. This was the assumption in the West. If Germany sells cars, Mercedes to Russia, and Russia sells gas, oil, and other resources, the thinking was that, well, Russia will behave because they need the West, they need Germany, and we can moderate their behavior. Unfortunately, it's the other way around. Russia and the Russian leadership were able to corrupt elements of the German elite, as you pointed out, elements of other political elites. Unfortunately, I mean, London, as you said, was filled with Russian money. So.
In the same time, when the scholars and when economical theorists were building this kind of ideas of exchange or change by trade, as the German saying goes, Russia created a doctrine of Falin and Kwieciński, which basically transforms to pipelines instead of tanks. This is the way it was called. People who were arranging the transformation of communism into post-communism, and those were basically the Russian KGB or whatever you call, whichever the secret services we are talking about, the diplomats of Russia in early 1990s, created this theory, and they were thinking from the very beginning, from point zero of this transformation, that they're going to use the energetic infrastructure to influence Western states, the same states that won actually the Cold War, in a new way. Are we talking right now about coming back to some energetic hybrid, whatever you call it, guerrilla in a way, war when we hear about the explosions in Prague, when we see about the fires in Warsaw, when we hear about the killings in Berlin, or using the radioactive substances or poisons in London, or when we hear about exploding ammo depots in Romania or in Czech Republic?
Absolutely. What you're talking about is so-called energy weapon used by Putin's regime. This connecting Europe to the Russian energy exports is often described as hardwiring, the hardwiring of Europe to Russia. And so for the last 20, 25 years, the Russian strategy was built on the assumption that Europe, especially Germany, but also others, need Russian energy so much that they will not be able to resist Russia's political pressure. So the energy supplies and the corruption that we just discussed, in the thinking of Putin and his regime, were actually going to provide the strongest leverage, the strongest form of influence for Russia. The other acts of sabotage that you described are also trademark of the KGB. As I said, Putin and his regime are based on as we all know, on this Soviet instrument of power, the KGB, and so they prefer this type of activities so they can disrupt the European security situation, especially in the context when there are elections, obviously in France and elsewhere in the US. If you create chaos, I mean, that's the old Soviet tactic also, remember. If you create chaos across the democratic world, then their thinking is that maybe people will start voting for parties that are anti-democratic, that are anti-liberal, and that they would maybe reduce the support for Ukraine and for the Eastern European countries. And so this is part of this political warfare, which is lies at the core of hybrid warfare. And of course, all these different elements support and facilitate and make it stronger.
My final question is actually the most important one in terms of the landscape that we are talking about here. Those elements of hybrid warfare in this vast and huge landscape that you drew are also steps on what is called an escalation ladder. And we are talking about the things that are below the level of war as we traditionally understand it. But on the other hand, the same part of the same doctrine of Gerasimov doctrine is the energetic warfare and nuclear warfare. So what is the role and what is the place of those acts that are below the level of war in the same process in which we do have this nuclear mayhem at the top? Because Russians very often say about it, and they use threats of a nuclear de-escalation, as they say, but how we should defend it against this kind of strategy of war waged against our collective West?
So this, Michal, this is a very important question because it goes to the core of of everything that Russia is doing, what they have been using against the West, not only for the last 25 years, but really for many decades and for centuries. But if you look at the Gerasimov doctrine that you referred to, you will clearly see that there are the actions that go below the threshold. And the reason is that Russia does not want to provoke an open, overt NATO reaction, because they, of course, understand that Article 5 is still quite active, so they don't want a collective NATO response. So their hope is that if they go under the radar, under the threshold, NATO will not be able to respond properly. But then there are also conventional methods. Obviously, they're using those against Ukraine, and they're also issuing threats of this nature against Poland, against the Baltic states. And finally, there are the nuclear threats that you spoke about, the so-called escalation dominance. There is this concept and doctrine of escalate to de-escalate. In other words, the Russian leadership is trying to, escalate the level of threats, hoping that the Western leaders, that the Western countries will get scared, and then they will back down. They will accept Russia's demands. So all of these three, the sub-threshold threats, then the conventional threats, and the nuclear threats, they are coordinated and they are deployed as one. Let's put it this way: hybrid hydra, like this mythological Greek animal, right, with many tentacles. The hope is that the Western politicians, as I said, would be scared of it, and that Russia will not even have to fight because the West would accept its demands. The way to fight this is to never yield to the Russian threats, and to be able to show to the Russian leadership that we can check them, we can counter any threat, any level of aggression against Poland, whether they use migrants, whether they use energy, whether they use nuclear threats. We have to be able to show them that we're prepared, that we are watching them, because I've never seen in history any example in history where Russia has attacked an enemy, a country that has been strong and that has been ready to respond. They always strike you in the back when you're relaxed, when you think that they're friends, when you think that they're not planning anything, and so they use your weak points when you're relaxed, when your guard is down. So if NATO is always on alert, the NATO countries, especially Poland, is the pivotal element in the NATO's defense along the eastern front line. I think this will give a strong signal to the Russian leadership to not try neither hybrid nor especially conventional or nuclear threats. So the answer is to be prepared all the time, to send them the message that we are ready, and don't try to do anything of this nature. Don't dare, because we're going to respond very vigorously.
Yeah, and I would add to this brilliant description another thing: never turn your back
Exactly.
on Russia, because Russia shoots in the back, and that's
Exactly.
what we learn from a history. Thank you very much for your presence. Hope that we are going to have a chance to talk again soon on our program.
Anytime.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
See you
you,
soon.
Michal.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our Substack, rockrachon.com. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our reports on what is going on, not only on the eastern NATO flank. See you soon. We come back sometime next week, but I cannot tell you precisely when, because NATO summit in Washington is next week. We're going to be somewhere around. See you soon.